Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to start with a tiny bit of housekeeping. All of our participants will be muted, but if you do have any questions, please use the chat. We've got a bunch of people on standby from a variety of teams across the globe who are here to answer any questions or direct you to any resources. Um, there will be a short poll about halfway through the presentation, and we're really interested to hear your feedback around the platform and how this format works. This is our first global webinar, so really keen to get as much feedback as possible. Okay, without further ado then, hopefully everyone can see the screen, and we're talking today about the cost of meeting room no-shows. Now I want to be very clear in terms of what we mean by the cost and what we mean by no-shows. So when we're talking about the costs, we're talking about wasted productivity and the wasted space itself. So meeting rooms cost quite a lot of money, and them going to waste and not being used efficiently has a cost. And when we're talking about no-shows, we're talking about people booking a space and not turning up to that space, okay? And you can see here we've got an interesting stat that workplace productivity has increased by 84% in the last 40 years due to digital technology. And you'll see a lot of information as we go through this presentation around particular technologies and how they have increased that productivity in the workspace. We're going to go through a few different sections. So the contents here you can see. We've got, first of all, we're going to run through a few of the most common meeting room frustrations. I'm sure many people on the call have probably had a few of these frustrations themselves, and we'll have a look into each one of those and then do a quick poll. We'll then look at the serious and significant impact of those frustrations and the no-shows and what that actually means to our customers and businesses across the world. And then lastly, we'll look at how meeting room technology, and in particular Condeco, can help with those problems. So, meeting room frustrations, and I'm imagining lots of people nodding along as we go through these different scenarios. But one of the first ones, the most common problems we see, is that my meeting room's been double booked. So you've either got two disconnected systems where someone's booked in one place and someone's booked in another, and those two systems don't talk to each other. So you end up with one person thinking it's their room and they've got it booked, but another person has it in their calendar. I'm sure everyone has had this experience in the past, especially when using more basic scheduling platforms. We also have meeting is cancelled, but the room is still booked. And this is a really simple use case that causes massive amounts of utilization problems when you're looking at space. If a person cancels a meeting, so if this webinar, for example, was cancelled, but we had a meeting room booked and we didn't release that meeting room, that room would sit there occupied or appearing occupied, but no one would turn up and no one would use that space. And I'm sure many people on the call and on the session and who are watching this later might feel that they've walked around an office on many occasions. They've seen there's no rooms available on the booking system. There's no rooms available when they speak to reception or their reservations team. But when they walk around, all the rooms are empty. There's nobody in there, or at least a vast majority of them are empty. And that's a real big frustration for the user community when they feel they can't book a space, but yet they can physically see all the space is empty. Overrunning meetings is a common thread that causes not only just frustration, but can cause conflicts and employee dissatisfaction because they're having to kick people out of rooms, they're having to wait outside the room, and their productivity is affected and their experience as a employee in a building is affected. There's various scenarios where that can occur. It can be because the people in the room aren't aware that their meeting room has come to an end or their meeting room booking hasn't come to an end, or it could be that they've just need to run on that meeting but don't have a way of updating that booking to show that they're running that meeting on for another 15 minutes, for example. Occupying rooms you haven't booked, or camping as some people call it. There's lots of fun words to describe it. But if you are walking around, you see a space is free and there's no visible way to know that space is booked, many people will simply jump into a space, and corporations will have no way to see that that space is being used or is occupied by a particular individual. And lastly, I think we have here is room efficiency. So spaces that have a certain capacity, they may have a 10 person, 20 person, it might be a large boardroom, but there's only one person sitting in it. I'm sure we've all seen that before, where you're walking around trying to find a room for 10 people. You found a room for 10 people, but there's just one person sitting in there on a conference call. So these are some of the most common frustrations that we have and that we've experienced with our customers before they become our customers potentially, but also with other studies we've done around the globe. So we're going to do a quick poll now just to understand for our audience which is the most frustrating instance for you, which one of those scenarios is the most irritating or gets under your skin. We'll give you about 30 seconds now to answer that question. We'll go on pause for a moment and we'll see what those answers are a little bit later in the presentation. I'm just going to read through them again just so everyone knows. So empty meeting rooms, so rooms that were booked or appear booked on whatever system you're using, but there's no one actually in them. The meeting room is cancelled, or the meeting itself is cancelled, but the room is still booked. Overrunning meetings, which extend into yours, causing conflict, causing you having to kick people out of rooms. Occupying a room you haven't booked, or camping in a room, so you've gone in there and you haven't actually booked it, and someone comes along and doesn't know if it's free or not. And lastly, one person or a few people using an inappropriately sized room, so that the right room you need for a certain size meeting is not available. Okay, I think we've got some good responses there. So we'll go back to that poll and the results in a little bit, and then we'll open up to have a bit of a discussion around which one of those scenarios is most frustrating. And also we'll talk a little bit about how we can help with them. It's really important. I think many businesses and many of our customers struggle to explain what the impact of those scenarios and those frustrations is on their business. So when you're looking at return on investment for a solution that helps with those problems, it's important to be able to measure the actual impact. And it isn't just a simple solution to say it will save us X amount of money. There's various different factors that come into why this impact is significant. So we've got a few statistics here. This is our first one that really stands out, which is that in a dollar value based on salaries, 40% of employees will actually equal about $1 million of salary cost in time they waste searching for rooms. So we've done some calculations there with a variety of sources, and people are wasting a significant amount of time trying to find a space, and based on average salaries, that equates to about $1 million per year. Now that's only in the cost of the salaries. We've got to also think about lost productivity and lost opportunity. So what could have those employees been doing with that time that they're searching for a room? They could have been having a productive meeting. They could have been just inventing the next Facebook, right? Some more stats here that are really useful, and we see a lot of our clients and a lot of our potential customers like to grab a screenshot of this and use this when they're talking about justifying making changes to their space. So that 40% we mentioned on the previous slide is worked out, you can see here in the top right hand corner, based on 3 weeks a year of people's time being lost per average corporate entity. And that's made up from the bottom left statistic, which is that 40% of employees spend 30 minutes searching for a space. So they're going around spending 30 minutes looking to set up a meeting to then be productive. And that, if you turn it into a weekly value per year, is 3 weeks of time lost across an average corporate entity. 36% there on the left-hand side is the average meeting room utilization. I think everyone who looks after a workspace, they will be keen probably to measure their utilization against the average utilization. And it's interesting because that's actually probably gone down a little bit globally, which is it used to be around 40-ish%. So we're actually, as a global facilities and workspace group and professionals, not addressing the problem of meeting room utilization as well as we could be. There's $20,000 is the average cost of a meeting room space. So when we're talking about what is the return on investment in making this space work better for us, not only are we talking about the increased productivity of our employees, the increased satisfaction of our employees, but we're also talking about making that $20,000 investment return to give us value back. As some people call it, sweating the asset. And lastly, 40% of meetings is the average no-show rate. So 40% of meetings don't actually go ahead as planned. Now that means if you're not managing those meetings, we're not ensuring those meetings are cancelled in the rooms, that's a significant impact to your meeting room utilization. So how can technology, and in particular obviously Condeco, help with these scenarios and help address some of these concerns that our customers and potential customers have? One of the really key things, and it's a big driver for us and for many of our customers, is around data-driven decisions. So until you can see the problem, how are you able to address it? Until you can understand how your space is being used and how people want to use the space, how can you make a decision around how you fit out your new building, how you do your refurb? So a really key thing that Condeco is focused on is around getting the information out of the product into a format that people can consume and make data-driven decisions. And this on the screen here is our Power BI integration. When we hooked this up for our office, for example, it was extremely enlightening as to how we were using space, and it informed us how to change that space to work better for our employees and for our bottom line. This slide here talks about some of the other areas around the smart building that need to be thought about when you're talking about enabling a better workplace experience. So we've got meeting room software over there on the left-hand side, but digital signage is sometimes underrated and thought as just a cool, trendy thing that makes your space look cool for customers or vendors coming in. It actually has a more emotional effect on employees that's sometimes underrated, which is it creates a value perception of space. If you have a problem where your staff don't value space in terms of they just use it willy-nilly, they block it out for months and months and months, it can be challenging to get that culture to change. And simply by presenting that space as something that is visual, by putting a screen outside the room, for example, showing the bookings, showing when it's free, showing when it's not, it creates a significant cultural change. Sensors being a part of that journey so you can understand your space better. Obviously mobile applications and mobile first technologies. People are increasingly more mobile today, and it's an ask of most new businesses trying to retain talent, for example, due to newer generations. And kiosks and chatbots. So these really come down to ensuring that the people's interaction and the employees' interaction with the building is simple, easy, and can be physically located where they are. Chatbots being able to communicate with natural language conversation, and kiosks being physically located in the building at strategic places. So the poll results, this is exciting. My colleague Claire is going to potentially talk to me about what they are. So let's have a look. Oh, okay. So we've got meetings cancelled, rooms still booked is your number one, 46%. Sorry, we're getting a bit of feedback there. There we go, that's better. So 46% of meeting rooms voted for meetings being cancelled, rooms still booked. And it's actually interesting because that's actually the easiest one to solve, right? That's the simplest one to solve by connecting the meeting in the user's calendar with the system that you're using to manage your room space. Those simple things. So when a user cancels that meeting in their calendar, it cancels the booking in the booking system, really helps with that major sticking point. I think in second place, we have overrunning meetings. And lastly, we have occupying rooms that you haven't booked. Okay, really interesting stuff. Thank you everyone for filling that in. Okay, so a bit more specific here in how Condeco can help with these scenarios. Obviously, we have our digital signage product, which can help with that value perception, but it also helps with things like people wanting to book instant meetings. So if someone wants to come up and use a space, they're able to do that at the screen simply outside the room without having to go back to their desk, without having to go back and log into their Outlook to book a space, for example. Our system and the Condeco system in general does not allow double bookings. It's not possible within the Condeco system. So straight away, you eliminate that frustration. Automated cancellations is a really key feature for taking it that step further and making your employees use space more responsibly by freeing up rooms that people don't turn up to after, say, 15 minutes or 30 minutes, makes a significant difference to people's focus on releasing meetings for others to use. And we see utilization go up very, very dramatically just by doing those two things. Link your booking system to your users' meetings in their calendars, and 2, bump meetings where people don't turn up. Those two things make a really, really big impact to the utilization of space. Meetings overrunning, so the ability to see when a meeting's supposed to end, get a notification, and also extend that meeting easily. Rather than having to go back to your desk to extend a meeting, you can very simply from a device outside the room just extend it by 15 minutes, for example, if you're overrunning. And the LED indicator, I think this is sometimes thought of as a very, very simple thing, but it really does create a better culture when it comes to meetings. So instead of looking through glass, banging on doors, knocking to see if people are free and interrupting the productivity of the ongoing meeting, you can see quite clearly a red light that room is unavailable. And also with the green light, you can see across a wide space, a wide field of vision, what rooms are free, and easily just go up to those rooms and start using them. This one's actually a more complicated and probably one of the more challenging scenarios to deal with, is about people not using rooms efficiently. Now, I haven't got a huge amount of time to talk about this, but at a very high level, we refer to room efficiency as if a room has a capacity of 10, for example, and people only use it for 5 attendees, that room was 50% efficient for that period of time. Now, using data-driven decisions and looking at room efficiency, you can really make informed decisions about what sizes of rooms you want to do in your refurb or your new building. So, for example, you may want to break down a 10-person room into 3 2-people rooms, for example, freeing up more space, having more meeting rooms, but actually meeting the user's needs, because typically they only have 2 to 3 people in a meeting. Whereas the 10-person rooms, you'd expect those to be a bit less because most of your meetings are smaller, more frequent meetings. Okay, I think that gives us a minute or two, maybe just to see if there's any kind of pressing questions from the chat. Anything come up at all? No? We have a question about room bump. Okay, sure. So we've got a question about room bump at the moment. Okay, and so the main question there is, if I have meeting rooms bumping, can I configure how long that meeting room bump takes? We don't want to be too aggressive, but we do want to make sure that people have a standard where they are actually releasing rooms in advance. So we generally set it to 15 minutes as our recommendation, and that's what the system defaults to, but you can change it to 15 minutes, 30 minutes. You can be as forgiving as you like. I think in the future we're looking at whether we do it as a percentage of the meeting as well, which I think is quite an interesting idea. So you do it 10% into the meeting, so it becomes variable, but at the moment we're looking at 15 minutes, 30 minutes, those kind of slots. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and please leave any feedback on the chat. Hopefully, we've got some really useful insights and questions that we can go back to. I think we've just had another question come in here that we might be able to answer. So we've got Arc and Deco products able to receive instructions from third-party software. Yes, so we've actually very recently, well, about 2 months ago, we launched our partner program for integration partners, and we've got some really exciting sensor partners coming into our ecosystem, or the ecosystem we're a part of. So we have a really strong set of simple to use APIs. If you actually talk to our team on chat, they can link you to our developer portal, which will take you onto our API documentation. That means that pretty much any sensor company can work with our APIs. But in addition to that, we will be bringing out of the box partnerships with a few key partners with sensor products that we think are really complementary to the ecosystem. We've got another one here that says, have you considered the cost of energy wasted in heating and cooling the empty and underutilized rooms? We haven't in these stats. No, that $1 million that they put there, and some of the other utilization statistics don't take into account lost opportunity of productivity and work, but also don't take into account the savings that can be had from efficiency, from an energy perspective, turning off lights, turning off HVAC, all which can be done either automatically or from our APIs, for example. We've got quite a few implementations at the moment where people are hooking into our APIs for HVAC systems and access control, lighting, Crestron, all these great products. Okay. I'm getting a nod that I think we need to wrap things up. I'm getting the wrapping up signal. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And I think we'll be doing these on a quite frequent basis going forward. So please feel free to join us again. Thank you very much.